Welcome to Science for Sleep, where wonder and calm meet. Each night we drift through galaxies, oceans, and mysteries of the natural world, not to startle, but to soothe. So, take a deep breath. Let curiosity slow your thoughts, and fall asleep to the sound of discovery. The dark side of the ocean. Imagine descending slowly through waters so deep that sunlight has never touched them, sinking gently past layers of darkness that grow thicker with every passing moment, entering a realm where the rules of the surface world no longer apply, and where creatures exist that seem borrowed from dreams and nightmares alike. Tonight, we journey together into the deep ocean, that vast, mysterious frontier that covers more than half of our planet, yet remains less explored than the surface of the moon. Down here, in the eternal midnight of the abyss, pressure crushes with the weight of mountains, cold penetrates to the very edge of freezing, and life persists in forms so strange and beautiful that they challenge everything we thought we knew about the possibilities of existence. This is the dark side of the ocean, not dark in the sense of evil or malevolent, but dark because light cannot reach these depths. And in that darkness has evolved an entire hidden world of wonder. As we drift downward together through these quiet waters, let yourself relax into the gentle rhythm of our descent, breathing slowly and deeply, like the patient currents that flow through the deep sea, settling into the peaceful darkness that surrounds us like a soft blanket. We will explore the mysteries of the abyss at a pace that matches your journey towards sleep, discovering creatures that glow with their own light, landscapes more dramatic than any mountain range on land, and secrets that the ocean has kept hidden for millions of years. Let the pressure of the day lift away as we sink deeper. Let your thoughts become as fluid as water, and allow yourself to float peacefully through this documentary about the last great wilderness on Earth, the dark side of the ocean, where silence reigns and wonders wait in the depths. Leaving the light behind, our journey begins at the surface of the ocean, where sunlight sparkles on waves and where most people think of when they imagine the sea. This is the realm of beaches and boats, of swimmers and surfers, the thin layer of water that touches the atmosphere and that humanity has known throughout all of history. The surface ocean is full of life and light and motion, constantly stirred by winds and warmed by the sun. Home to fish and dolphins and whales that breathe air and must return to the surface regularly. But this bright surface layer is just the beginning, a thin skin covering something much deeper and much darker. As we begin our descent, sinking slowly beneath the waves, the light begins to change almost immediately, shifting from bright white sunlight to softer blues and greens as the water absorbs the red wavelengths first. 10 feet below the surface, everything takes on a blue-green tint, and reds and oranges disappear, filtered out by the water molecules themselves. 20 feet down, 30 feet, 50 feet, and the light continues to dim as more and more of the sun's energy is absorbed by the water above us. The ocean absorbs light very efficiently, and even in the clearest tropical waters, only about 1% of surface light penetrates to depths of about 600 feet. This uppermost layer of the ocean, where enough light penetrates for photosynthesis to occur, is called the euphotic zone or the sunlight zone, and it extends from the surface down to roughly 600 feet, depending on water clarity. This is where phytoplankton live, microscopic plants drifting in the water and using sunlight to create energy through photosynthesis, just like plants on land. These tiny organisms form the base of the ocean food web, feeding small animals called zooplankton, which in turn feed larger creatures, and so on up the chain to the great predators of the open ocean. But as we continue our gentle descent, we leave the realm of phytoplankton behind and enter a transition zone called the dysphotic zone or twilight zone, stretching from about 600 feet down to about 3,000 feet. In the twilight zone, some light still filters down from above, but not enough for photosynthesis, not enough to sustain plant life, only enough to create a dim, gloomy illumination like deep dusk or the light just before dawn. Animals in the twilight zone can still see shapes and shadows, and many of them migrate up toward the surface at night to feed and then descend again during the day to hide from predators in the dimness. This daily vertical migration involves billions of small fish and invertebrates moving hundreds of feet up and down each day. And it represents the largest migration of animals on Earth in terms of sheer biomass. Yet most people have never heard of it because it happens entirely underwater and largely out of sight. Entering the midnight zone. As we pass through the twilight zone and continue our slow, peaceful descent, the last traces of sunlight disappear completely, and we enter a realm of absolute and eternal darkness. This is the midnight zone, technically called the bathypelagic zone, extending from about 3,000 feet down to around 13,000 feet. And here no sunlight has ever penetrated since the formation of the oceans billions of years ago. The darkness here is complete and perfect, a blackness so total that it is difficult for human minds to comprehend, because we have never experienced true darkness on land, where there is always some light from stars or moon or artificial sources. In the midnight zone, there is nothing but darkness in every direction. An endless night that has lasted for billions of years and will continue for billions more. The temperature in these depths hovers just a few degrees above freezing, typically between 35 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold enough that you would quickly develop hypothermia without protection, yet not cold enough for water to freeze because the salt content of seawater lowers its freezing point. The pressure at these depths is crushing, increasing by about 1 atmosphere for every 33 feet of depth, meaning that at 3,000 feet the pressure is roughly 90 times greater than at the surface. And at 13,000 feet it reaches nearly 400 atmospheres. This pressure would instantly crush any air-filled space, collapsing lungs and rupturing cells, making it impossible for land animals to survive here without specialized equipment. Yet life persists in the midnight zone, adapted over millions of years to thrive in conditions that seem impossibly hostile to creatures evolved for the surface. The animals that live here have no air spaces in their bodies. Their cells filled with incompressible fluids that equalize the pressure inside and out, allowing them to exist comfortably at depths that would destroy surface dwellers. These creatures have evolved in isolation from the sunlit world above, developing bizarre adaptations to survive in the darkness and cold and pressure, creating an ecosystem utterly unlike anything on the surface. Food is scarce in the midnight zone because there are no plants, and because the only energy sources are the constant rain of dead organisms and waste material falling from the layers above, and the occasional larger carcass of a dead whale or fish sinking down from the surface. This marine snow, as scientists call it, drifts slowly downward through the water column, gradually decomposing as bacteria and small animals consume it, but enough reaches the deep sea to sustain the communities of life that exist there. The animals of the midnight zone are mostly small, usually just a few inches long, with soft gelatinous bodies and slow metabolisms that allow them to survive on very little food. Many of them are transparent, or nearly so, invisible in the darkness, while others are deep red or black, colors that appear invisible in the absence of red light. The language of light in darkness. In the complete darkness of the deep ocean where no sunlight penetrates, life has found a remarkable way to create its own illumination through a process called bioluminescence. The production of light by living organisms through chemical reactions. Between 80 and 90% of deep-sea creatures can produce light in one way or another, making bioluminescence the rule rather than the exception in the midnight zone. This living light is created through the interaction of a light-producing chemical called luciferin with an enzyme called luciferase. And when these substances combine in the presence of oxygen, they produce light with very little heat. A cold light that glows blue or blue-green because these wavelengths travel farthest through water. Some animals produce their own light through cells called photophores arranged in patterns on their bodies, while others house colonies of bioluminescent bacteria in special organs and control when these bacteria glow. The purposes of bioluminescence in the deep sea are varied and sophisticated, representing millions of years of evolution, solving the problems of life in darkness. Many fish use patterns of light on their undersides to match the faint glow from above, a camouflage technique called counter-illumination that helps them blend in when viewed from below and prevents their silhouettes from being visible to predators. Other creatures use bright flashes of light to startle predators or to blind them temporarily, creating confusion that allows escape. Some deep-sea fish have elaborate light organs near their eyes that work like searchlights, allowing them to scan the darkness for prey or for potential mates. The anglerfish is perhaps the most famous example of using bioluminescence as a lure, with females carrying a modified dorsal spine that extends forward over the mouth like a fishing rod, tipped with a glowing blob of bioluminescent bacteria. The anglerfish sits motionless in the darkness, waving this lure gently to attract curious prey fish, and when something comes close enough to investigate, the anglerfish strikes with lightning speed, opening its huge mouth and creating a suction that pulls the victim inside. The male anglerfish is much smaller than the female and has a different survival strategy entirely, one of the strangest reproductive strategies in nature. Male anglerfish spend their lives searching through the darkness for a female, and when they finally find one, they bite onto her body and never let go. Over time, the male fuses with the female, his circulatory system connecting to hers, and he gradually degenerates until he is little more than a pair of testes attached to her body, providing sperm whenever she needs to reproduce, while she provides all the nutrients he requires. This bizarre arrangement ensures that in the vast darkness of the deep sea where finding a mate is extraordinarily difficult, once a male finds a female, they stay together permanently. The giants of the abyss. While most creatures of the deep sea are small, there exist in these dark waters some of the largest invertebrates on Earth, animals that grow to sizes impossible for their relatives in shallow water. The giant squid, that legendary creature of sailors' tales and sea monster legends, lives in the midnight zone and grows to lengths exceeding 40 feet from the tip of its body to the end of its longest tentacles. For centuries, giant squid were known only from dead specimens washed ashore or found in the stomachs of sperm whales, and many scientists noted they could grow as large as the stories claimed. It was not until the early 2000s that living giant squid were finally filmed in their natural habitat, revealing creatures of grace and power, moving through the darkness with large, intelligent eyes and long-reaching tentacles lined with suckers rimmed by sharp teeth. The giant squid's eyes are the largest of any animal, as big as dinner plates, evolved to gather every possible photon of light in the near-total darkness and to spot the bioluminescent flashes of prey or the approaching form of their main predator, the sperm whale. Even larger than the giant squid is its relative, the colossal squid, which reaches similar lengths but is much heavier and bulkier, with sharp hooks on its tentacles in addition to suckers, and with an even more robust body. These enormous cephalopods are active predators in the deep sea, hunting fish and smaller squid. But they themselves are hunted by sperm whales that dive thousands of feet into the darkness to pursue them. The battles between sperm whales and giant or colossal squid occur in the deep ocean, far from human observation. But evidence of these struggles can be seen in the circular scars left by squid suckers on the skin of whales, and in the squid, beaks found in whale stomachs. Another giant of the deep is the giant isopod, a relative of pillbugs or roly-polies that grows to over a foot long, making it look like a huge underwater cockroach with multiple legs and a segmented armored body. Giant isopods are scavengers that crawl across the deep ocean floor looking for food, mainly dead animals that have sunk from above, and they can go for months or even years without eating when food is scarce. Surviving on stored energy in their bodies, deep sea gigantism, as this phenomenon is called, occurs in many groups of animals, including spider crabs with legs spanning 12 feet, sea spiders the size of dinner plates, amphipods that grow hundreds of times larger than their shallow water cousins, and tube worms that reach lengths of 8 feet. Scientists believe this gigantism may be related to several factors, including the cold temperatures, which slow metabolism and allow longer growth periods, the reduced predation pressure in the deep sea, which allows animals to live longer and grow larger, and the need for larger bodies to store energy during long periods between meals. The ocean floor descends. As we continue our gentle descent through the midnight zone, we eventually approach the ocean floor, the bottom of the sea that stretches across most of Earth's surface, yet remains less mapped and less explored than the planet Mars. The ocean floor is not a flat, featureless plain, but a landscape of incredible drama and variety. With mountain ranges taller than the Himalayas, valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon, volcanoes that dwarf any on land, and vast plains that extend for thousands of miles. The average depth of the ocean is about 12,000 feet, but in many places it plunges much deeper. And along certain trenches and canyons, the seafloor drops to depths exceeding 35,000 feet, nearly 7 miles straight down. The deepest point in all the oceans is the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench in the western Pacific Ocean, where the seafloor lies nearly 36,000 feet below the surface, a depth so extreme that if Mount Everest were placed in this trench, its peak would still be more than a mile underwater. At these abyssal depths, the pressure reaches over 1,000 atmospheres, more than 8 tons per square inch, enough to crush almost any structure not specifically designed to withstand such forces. Only a handful of human beings have ever visited the deepest parts of the ocean, far fewer than have traveled to space. And most of what we know about these extreme depths comes from robotic submersibles and sampling devices that can withstand the crushing pressure. The ocean floor at abyssal depths is generally covered with a fine sediment called ooze, composed of the accumulated remains of dead organisms that have been raining down from above for millions of years. This ooze accumulates very slowly, typically just a fraction of an inch per 1,000 years. But over geological time, it builds up to great thickness, preserving a record of ocean conditions that scientists can read like a history book by drilling cores from the seafloor. In some areas, the sediment is hundreds of feet thick, while in others, especially near mid-ocean ridges, where new seafloor is being created, the rock is bare or covered with only a thin dusting of sediment. The deep ocean floor is not a dead zone, but supports communities of life specially adapted to existence in the cold, dark, high-pressure environment. Sea cucumbers creep slowly across the bottom, filtering sediment through their bodies and extracting any organic matter they can find. Brittle stars wave their long, spindly arms in the current, catching bits of marine snow as it drifts past. Strange fish with large mouths and expandable stomachs lie in wait on the bottom, ready to gulp down any prey that comes near. Tube worms extend from the sediment, filtering the water for food particles. These animals live at a pace that matches their environment, moving slowly, metabolizing slowly, reproducing slowly, living lives that may span decades or even centuries in some cases. Mountains under the sea. Hidden beneath the ocean's dark waters lies the longest mountain range on Earth, a continuous underwater chain that winds for more than 40,000 miles through all the ocean basins, longer than all the mountain ranges on land combined. This is the Mid-Ocean Ridge System, a network of underwater mountains formed by volcanic activity, where tectonic plates are pulling apart and new seafloor is being created. Along the crest of these ridges, magma rises from deep within the earth, erupting as lava that cools in contact with seawater and solidifies to form new oceanic crust. This process, called seafloor spreading, has been creating new ocean floor continuously for hundreds of millions of years, and the ridges mark the places where this creation is happening right now. The mid-ocean ridges rise thousands of feet above the surrounding seafloor, with the highest peaks sometimes coming within a mile or two of the surface, and occasionally breaking through to form volcanic islands like Iceland, which sits astride the mid-Atlantic ridge. The ridges are not smooth features, but are cut by deep valleys and fissures, fractured by the forces that pull the plates apart, and punctuated by volcanic peaks and cones. Along the crest of the ridges where volcanic activity is most intense, the seafloor is young and rough, covered with fresh pillow lavas that formed when molten rock erupted into cold water and solidified into rounded pillow-shaped masses. Moving away from the ridge crest, the seafloor grows progressively older and cooler, sinking slightly as it ages and accumulating a thicker layer of sediment. The discovery of the mid-ocean ridges and the understanding of seafloor spreading revolutionized Earth science in the 1960s, providing the key evidence for the theory of plate tectonics that explains how continents move, how mountains form, and why earthquakes and volcanoes occur where they do. The mid-ocean ridges represent zones of creation where new lithosphere is born, while deep ocean trenches represent zones of destruction where old seafloor is consumed, sinking back into Earth's interior in a process called subduction. These trenches form where one tectonic plate is forced beneath another, diving down into the mantle and eventually being recycled back into the planet's interior. The trenches are the deepest parts of the ocean, long, narrow depressions that can extend for hundreds or thousands of miles, and that reach depths of more than 35,000 feet. The Mariana Trench is the deepest, but other trenches, including the Tonga Trench, the Philippine Trench, and the Peru-Chile Trench, also plunge to extreme depths. The walls of these trenches are among the steepest slopes on Earth, descending at angles of up to 45 degrees, and the trenches themselves are often sites of earthquake activity as the descending plate grinds against the overriding plate. Hydrothermal vents and chemosynthesis. Perhaps the most astonishing discovery ever made in the deep ocean came in 1977, when scientists exploring the Galapagos Rift in a deep-sea submersible stumbled upon something completely unexpected. In the absolute darkness of the ocean floor, more than 1.5 miles below the surface, they found thriving communities of life clustered around volcanic vents that spewed superheated water into the surrounding cold seawater. These hydrothermal vents, also called black smokers or white smokers, depending on the color of the minerals they emit, occur along mid-ocean ridges where cold seawater seeps down through cracks in the seafloor, becomes heated by magma below, dissolves minerals from the rock, and then erupts back into the ocean, carrying those dissolved minerals with it. The water emerging from these vents can reach temperatures exceeding 700 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lead, but it does not boil, because the extreme pressure at these depths raises water's boiling point far above normal. When the superheated mineral-rich water meets the cold oxygen-rich seawater of the deep ocean, the minerals precipitate out, creating clouds of particles that look like smoke pouring from an underwater chimney. Over time, these minerals accumulate around the vent, building up structures called chimneys that can grow to heights of dozens of feet, and that continuously spew their mineral-laden water into the darkness. What made the discovery of hydrothermal vents truly revolutionary was not the vents themselves, but the life surrounding them. Scientists found dense communities of animals, including tube worms 6 feet long with bright red plumes, white crabs swarming over the rocks, clusters of giant clams, strange eyeless shrimp, and many other creatures, all thriving in conditions that seemed impossible for life. There was no sunlight here, no photosynthesis, no connection to the surface food web that sustains all other known ecosystems. And yet here was abundant life in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The mystery of how these communities could exist was solved when scientists discovered that bacteria living in and around the vents were using chemical energy rather than light energy to produce organic compounds, a process called chemosynthesis. These bacteria harvest energy from the chemical reactions between the vent fluids and the seawater, particularly reactions involving hydrogen sulfide, a toxic chemical that smells like rotten eggs, but that these bacteria can use as an energy source. The bacteria form the base of the food web at hydrothermal vents, and many of the animals living there have evolved symbiotic relationships with these bacteria. The giant tube worms that dominate many vent communities have no mouth, no digestive system, and no anus. Yet they grow rapidly and can live for decades. They survive through a partnership with chemosynthetic bacteria that live inside their bodies in a special organ called a trophosome. The tube worms provide the bacteria with hydrogen sulfide and oxygen absorbed from the water by their red plumes, and the bacteria provide the tube worms with organic nutrients produced through chemosynthesis. Life at the extremes. The hydrothermal vent ecosystems demonstrated that life could exist and even thrive in conditions far more extreme than scientists had previously thought possible, fundamentally changing our understanding of the limits of life and expanding the possibilities for where life might exist in the universe. The discovery opened up new fields of research into extremophiles, organisms that live in extreme conditions, including extreme heat, extreme cold, extreme pressure, extreme acidity, extreme salinity, and environments with high levels of radiation or toxic chemicals. Many extremophiles are bacteria or archaea, single-celled microorganisms that have evolved remarkable adaptations, allowing them to survive and reproduce in places where complex life cannot exist. Some thermophilic bacteria thrive in the hot water flowing from hydrothermal vents, growing best at temperatures that would cook most organisms. And some hyperthermophiles can survive and reproduce at temperatures exceeding 200 degrees Fahrenheit. These organisms have special proteins and cell structures that remain stable at high temperatures where normal proteins would denature and lose their function. Other bacteria called psychrophiles are adapted to extreme cold and can grow in water that is below the normal freezing point, kept liquid by pressure or by dissolved salts. Barophiles or piezophiles are organisms adapted to high pressure and can only survive and reproduce in the deep ocean where pressure is extreme, dying if brought to the surface where pressure is low. The study of extremophiles has practical implications beyond pure science, including potential applications in industry, where enzymes from thermophilic bacteria can be used in processes requiring high temperatures, and in medicine, where compounds from extremophiles might have pharmaceutical uses. The discovery of life at hydrothermal vents also has implications for the search for life elsewhere in the solar system and beyond. If life can exist in the dark ocean depths sustained by chemical energy rather than sunlight, then similar life might exist in the subsurface oceans thought to exist on Jupiter's moon, Europa, and Saturn's moon Enceladus, where liquid water exists beneath thick ice crusts and where hydrothermal activity might provide chemical energy. The deep ocean of Earth may be our best analog for conditions on these distant moons. And studying life in Earth's abyssal depths helps us understand what to look for and how to look for it when we send missions to explore those alien oceans. The adaptations that allow life to survive in the deep ocean are numerous and sophisticated, the result of millions of years of evolution in isolation from the sunlit world above. Beyond the obvious adaptations to darkness and pressure and cold, deep sea creatures have evolved strategies for dealing with scarcity of food, difficulty finding mates, and other challenges of living in a sparse environment. Survival strategies in the abyss. Life in the deep ocean requires special strategies for survival because food is scarce, mates are hard to find, and energy must be conserved at all costs. Many deep-sea fish have enormous mouths and expandable stomachs that allow them to swallow prey larger than themselves. An important adaptation when meals are infrequent, and you need to take advantage of every feeding opportunity. The gulper eel or pelican eel has a mouth that can open wide enough to engulf prey much larger than its slender body would suggest possible, and its stomach can expand to accommodate this large meal. After feeding, the gulper eel can survive for weeks or months, digesting its meal slowly while waiting for the next opportunity. Some deep-sea fish, including certain anglerfish and black swallowers, can swallow prey larger than themselves, stretching their skin and stomach to an extraordinary degree, sometimes even dying from the attempt when they catch something too large to digest properly. The strategy of eating large and frequent meals makes sense in an environment where food is scarce and unpredictable. Better to gorge when possible than to rely on regular small meals that may never come. Many deep-sea creatures have reduced their metabolism to extremely low levels, moving slowly, growing slowly, and requiring little energy to maintain basic life functions. This slow-motion lifestyle allows them to survive on the meager food resources available, but also means that deep-sea animals may live much longer than their shallow-water relatives, sometimes for decades or even centuries. Some deep-sea fish grow so slowly that they may not reach sexual maturity until they are several decades old. An orange roughy, a commercially important deep-sea fish, can live for over 100 years. This slow growth and late maturity makes deep-sea species particularly vulnerable to overfishing because populations take a long time to recover from depletion. The problem of finding mates in the vast darkness of the deep ocean has led to various solutions, including the bizarre fusion of male and female anglerfish already mentioned. Other species have evolved heightened senses that allow them to detect potential mates from far away, using chemical signals or bioluminescent displays. Some deep-sea fish produce species-specific patterns of bioluminescence that help individuals recognize potential mates of their own species, acting like a visual ID badge in the darkness. The sense of smell is highly developed in many deep-sea creatures because chemical signals can travel long distances through water and can help locate food and mates even in complete darkness. Some species release powerful pheromones that can be detected by potential mates from hundreds of yards away. And males follow these chemical trails through the water until they find the female who released them. The abyssal plains. Beyond the dramatic landscapes of mid-ocean ridges and deep trenches lie the abyssal plains, vast flat regions that cover more of Earth's surface than any other environment. These plains stretch for thousands of miles across the ocean basins at depths between 10,000 and 20,000 feet. And they are among the flattest and most featureless landscapes on Earth, with slopes typically less than 1 in 1,000. The abyssal plains are formed by the accumulation of sediment over millions of years. Sediment that slowly fills in any irregularities in the underlying volcanic rock and creates a smooth, flat surface. The sediment comes partly from the rain of marine snow from the waters above, partly from particles carried by ocean currents and deposited when those currents slow down, and partly from dust blown from continents and settling onto the ocean surface before sinking. Despite their reputation as biological deserts, the abyssal plains do support life, though in lower densities than shallower or more geologically active regions. The animals living on abyssal plains are mostly small invertebrates, including various worms, small crustaceans, sea cucumbers, and brittle stars, all moving slowly across the sediment surface or burrowing into it in search of food. The sediment itself is alive with bacteria that break down the organic matter raining down from above and that form an important part of the deep ocean food web. These bacterial communities may contain millions or billions of cells per cubic inch of sediment, and they play a crucial role in recycling nutrients and breaking down organic material. In some areas, currents concentrate food in certain locations, creating oases where life is more abundant, and animals gather to take advantage of these resource-rich spots. Whale falls represent perhaps the most dramatic example of food concentration on the abyssal plains. When a large whale dies and sinks to the ocean floor, it brings with it tens of tons of organic matter, enough to support a complex community of scavengers and decomposers for decades. The whale carcass goes through several stages of decomposition, first attracting mobile scavengers like hagfish and sleeper sharks that consume the soft tissues, then supporting dense populations of worms and crustaceans that colonize the bones, and finally hosting specialized bacteria that break down the oils in the whale's skeleton. A single whale fall can support more than 400 species over a period of 50 to 100 years, creating an island of life in the relatively sparse abyssal plain. Scientists have discovered that some species live only at whale falls, moving from carcass to carcass across the deep ocean floor. And these species raise questions about how they find new whale falls and how populations remain connected across the vast distances of the abyss. The Hadal Zone. Below the abyssal plains, in the deepest ocean trenches, lies a realm so extreme that it has been given its own name, the Hadal Zone, named after Hades, the ancient Greek underworld. The Hadal Zone begins at about 20,000 feet and extends to the deepest points in the ocean at nearly 36,000 feet. A vertical range of over 3 miles within which conditions become progressively more extreme. Pressure in the Hadal Zone exceeds 600 atmospheres and can reach over 1,000 atmospheres at the deepest points. Temperatures hover just above freezing, and food is extremely scarce. For decades, scientists believed the Hadal Zone might be devoid of life because the conditions seem too harsh for organisms to survive. But explorations using deep diving submersibles and baited cameras have revealed that life persists even at the greatest depths. Amphipods, small shrimp-like crustaceans have been found thriving in the Mariana Trench at depths exceeding 33,000 feet, swimming actively and feeding on organic matter that sinks into the trench. These amphipods are among the deepest living animals ever discovered. They show remarkable adaptations to the extreme pressure, including special proteins that remain functional at pressures that would destroy normal proteins. Snailfish have been recorded at depths approaching 27,000 feet, making them the deepest living fish known. And these strange gelatinous fish survive through a variety of adaptations, including the absence of a swim bladder, a flexible skeleton with little calcification, and transparent or translucent tissues. The Hadal zone is not uniformly deep, but consists of isolated trenches separated by shallower seafloor, creating a series of separate deep basins that have been isolated from each other for millions of years. This isolation has led to the evolution of unique species in each trench, with many Hadal organisms found in only one trench and nowhere else in the world. The trenches act like islands of deep habitat in a sea of shallower abyssal plain, and animals cannot easily move from one trench to another, leading to high levels of endemism, where each trench has its own distinctive fauna. Exploring the Hadal zone is extremely challenging because of the extreme depth and pressure, and only a few submersibles have ever been built that can reach the deepest parts of the trenches. The first descent to the bottom of the Mariana Trench was made in 1960 by Jacques Picard and Don Walsh in the bathyscaphe Trieste, and they reached the deepest point at nearly 36,000 feet, spending about 20 minutes at the bottom before ascending. They reported seeing a flat fish on the bottom, proving that life exists even at the greatest depths, though the identification of this fish has been questioned. It was not until 52 years later, in 2012, that the second manned descent to the Mariana Trench bottom was made by filmmaker James Cameron in his submersible deep-sea Challenger, and he spent several hours on the bottom collecting samples and filming the environment. Bioluminescence as art and science. Returning to the phenomenon of bioluminescence, let us drift quietly through the darkness and appreciate the beauty and complexity of living light in the deep ocean. If you could somehow visit the midnight zone and allow your eyes to adjust to the darkness, you would see an extraordinary light show. Flashes and glows and patterns of luminescence creating a constantly changing display like fireflies in a summer meadow, but stranger and more varied. Some animals produce steady glows, while others flash rapidly. Some create patterns of light across their bodies, while others emit clouds of luminous material into the water. And each of these displays has a purpose, whether communication, predation, defense, or camouflage. The color of bioluminescence in the deep sea is almost always blue or blue-green, because these wavelengths travel farthest through water and are the most efficient for communication and signaling. Some animals can produce different colors of light for different purposes, and a few deep-sea fish have red bioluminescence, which is invisible to most other animals because their eyes cannot detect red light. These red light specialists use their red light like a secret flashlight, illuminating prey that cannot see the light and therefore do not know they are being observed. Stoplight loosejaw fish have this ability, producing red light from organs below their eyes and using it to hunt for small glowing copepods and other prey without alerting them to danger. The biochemistry of bioluminescence is elegant and efficient, producing light through a chemical reaction with virtually no wasted heat, far more efficient than any artificial light source humans have created. Scientists have studied these light-producing systems intensively and have found ways to use the luciferin luciferase system in research, using bioluminescent proteins as markers to track processes in living cells and to visualize biological phenomena that would otherwise be invisible. Green fluorescent protein, originally discovered in jellyfish, has revolutionized cell biology by allowing scientists to tag specific proteins and watch them move through cells. And this discovery earned its developers the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2008. The study of bioluminescence connects art and science, because the light displays of deep-sea creatures are not just functional, but beautiful, creating patterns and movements that humans find aesthetically pleasing, even when those displays evolved for entirely practical purposes, having nothing to do with beauty. The gentle glow of a jellyfish, the twinkling lights on a squid, the luminous lure of an anglerfish. These things speak to something deep in human consciousness, perhaps reminding us of stars or fireflies or other lights that have meaning in our evolutionary history. The midnight swimmers. Among the most graceful residents of the deep ocean are the midwater swimmers, fish and invertebrates that spend their entire lives suspended in the water column far from both surface and bottom, drifting and swimming through the darkness of the midnight zone. These creatures face unique challenges because they have no solid surface to rest on or hide behind, existing in three-dimensional space, where predators can approach from any direction and where finding food requires constant motion or patient waiting. Many midwater fish have evolved to be nearly transparent or translucent, making them almost invisible in the darkness, and even their internal organs may be difficult to see because they are arranged to minimize the animal's visibility. Some fish have silvery reflective sides that mirror the faint light from above, creating a kind of camouflage that makes them blend with their surroundings. Others are dark red or black, colors that absorb any bioluminescent light that might hit them and prevent that light from reflecting back to reveal their presence. The body shapes of midwater swimmers vary enormously depending on their lifestyle and hunting strategy. Some are long and eel-like, able to move through the water with minimal effort, while others are short and compressed with large fins for quick bursts of speed. Some have enormous eyes to gather maximum light, while others have reduced or absent eyes because vision is less important than other senses in the deep darkness. Lanternfish are among the most abundant midwater fish, and possibly the most abundant vertebrates on Earth in terms of numbers, with worldwide populations estimated in the hundreds of trillions. These small fish, usually just a few inches long, have rows of photophores along their sides and belly that they use for counter-illumination camouflage, and they make daily vertical migrations from the depths to the surface waters to feed at night. Hatchetfish are another common group of midwater swimmers, named for their distinctive body shape that resembles a hatchet blade, very deep from top to bottom but thin from side to side. This shape may help them present a minimal profile when viewed from the side, while maintaining body mass for muscle attachment. Hatchetfish have large tubular eyes that point upward, scanning for the silhouettes of prey or predators above them, and they have photophores on their underside for counter-illumination. The vampire squid, despite its fearsome name, is actually a relatively small and gentle creature that feeds on marine snow and organic particles rather than actively hunting prey. Its name comes from its dark color and the skin connecting its 8 arms like a cape, and from its ability to turn itself inside out to display a spiny defensive posture when threatened. The vampire squid can produce bioluminescent displays from the tips of its arms and from photophores on its body, creating patterns of light that may confuse predators or serve as warnings. Ancient lineages of the deep. The deep ocean serves as a refuge for ancient forms of life, creatures whose ancestors evolved hundreds of millions of years ago, and whose basic body plans have changed little since then, because the deep ocean environment itself has remained relatively stable for vast periods of time. While the surface ocean and the land have undergone dramatic changes in climate and conditions over geological time, the deep ocean has maintained similar temperatures, pressures, and darkness for hundreds of millions of years, creating a stable environment where ancient lineages can persist. Some deep-sea creatures are called living fossils, a term scientists use somewhat cautiously because all living things continue to evolve, but which captures the idea that some organisms retain ancient characteristics lost in their relatives that live in more changeable environments. The coelacanth, though not exclusively a deep water fish, is perhaps the most famous living fossil, a lobe-finned fish whose ancestors were thought to have gone extinct 66 million years ago until living specimens were discovered off the coast of South Africa in 1938. The coelacanth has changed little from its ancient ancestors, retaining the lobed fins that give the group its name and that represent an early evolutionary experiment in limb development. Another ancient group well represented in the deep sea are the sea spiders, or pycnogonids, arthropods that look like all legs, with almost no body. Some species reaching leg spans of over 2 feet. Sea spiders are found from shallow to deep water, but are especially diverse in the deep ocean. And their basic body plan dates back over 500 million years to the Cambrian period. They are not true spiders, but a separate branch of arthropods that diverged from other groups very early in evolutionary history. Horseshoe crabs are another ancient lineage that has relatives in the deep sea. Though the familiar horseshoe crabs themselves live in shallow coastal waters, their ancestors date back over 450 million years, making them older than the dinosaurs, and their basic body structure has changed little during that entire time. Many groups of deep-sea animals show characteristics that scientists consider primitive or basal, meaning they retain features present in early members of their group before later evolutionary innovations changed the body plan. Studying these creatures helps scientists understand how various animal groups evolved and what characteristics were present in their ancestors. The deep ocean is sometimes described as a museum of evolutionary history, preserving forms that have disappeared from other environments. Though this metaphor should not be taken too literally, because deep-sea creatures continue to evolve and adapt like all living things. Sounds in the silent deep. Although we often think of the deep ocean as silent, an absence of sound matching the absence of light, the reality is more complex and interesting. While the deep sea lacks the biological cacophony of shallow waters with their whale songs and dolphin clicks and snapping shrimp, sound does occur and travels efficiently through the water, sometimes crossing entire ocean basins. Water is an excellent conductor of sound, much better than air, and sound waves can travel thousands of miles through the ocean under the right conditions, particularly through layers of water where temperature and pressure create sound channels that trap and guide sound waves. Whales use these sound channels to communicate across vast distances, and some whale calls recorded in one ocean can be detected in other oceans halfway around the world. The deepest parts of the ocean occasionally experience sound from earthquakes and underwater volcanoes, rumbling vibrations that propagate through the water and through the seafloor itself. Though whether deep-sea animals can detect and respond to these sounds remains unclear. Some deep-sea creatures produce sounds for communication, though this is less common than in shallow waters and has been little studied because of the difficulty of making underwater recordings at great depths. Certain deep-sea fish can produce sounds by vibrating their swim bladders or by rubbing together modified bones, creating grunts, clicks, or buzzing sounds that may serve to attract mates or warn off competitors. The three-spined toadfish, though not a deep-sea species, provides an example of how even small fish can produce surprisingly loud sounds that travel through water. Deep-sea research submarines and robotic vehicles sometimes record ambient sounds in the abyss, picking up mysterious clicks, groans, and rumbles whose sources are often unknown. Some of these sounds may come from biological sources, others from geological processes like sediment shifting or rocks cracking, and others from ice calving from glaciers thousands of miles away. The ocean is filled with a background of sound from waves breaking at the surface, from rain falling, from ships transiting overhead, and from countless other sources, creating a soundscape that varies by location and time. Man-made noise has become increasingly prevalent in the oceans over the past century as shipping traffic has increased, as oil and gas exploration has expanded, and as military sonar systems have been deployed. This anthropogenic noise can interfere with marine animal communication and behavior, particularly for species like whales and dolphins that rely heavily on sound. But the effects on deep-sea creatures are largely unknown because we have little baseline information about their natural soundscapes or their sensitivity to noise. The alien nature of deep-sea life. Looking at photographs or videos of deep-sea creatures, one is struck by how alien they appear, how different from the familiar animals of land and shallow water, how strange and sometimes unsettling their forms and behaviors seem. This alien quality is not superficial, but reflects genuine differences in how these organisms are structured and how they function. Adaptations to an environment so different from the surface that it might as well be another planet. The gelatinous consistency of many deep-sea animals, their transparent or translucent bodies, their exaggerated features like enormous mouths or eyes or fins, their bioluminescent displays and bizarre reproductive strategies. All these characteristics evolved independently in the isolated environment of the deep ocean, producing life forms that seem to follow different rules than surface creatures. Consider the barrel-eye fish or spookfish, which has a transparent dome on top of its head through which you can see its tubular eyes pointing upward inside the fluid-filled cavity of its skull. This extraordinary adaptation allows the fish to look upward for prey while protecting its sensitive eyes. And the fish can rotate its eyes forward when it wants to see what is in front of its mouth. The existence of such a creature challenges our assumptions about how fish can be structured and demonstrates the power of natural selection to produce unexpected solutions to environmental challenges. Consider the fangtooth fish, which has the largest teeth relative to body size of any fish in the ocean. Enormous curved fangs that are so large the fish cannot fully close its mouth. These teeth are an adaptation for capturing prey in an environment where meals are infrequent and must be secured when encountered. And the fish has special sockets in its skull to accommodate the teeth when the mouth closes as much as possible. Consider the Dumbo octopus, named for the ear-like fins on the sides of its head that it flaps to swim, living at depths exceeding 13,000 feet and looking more like a cartoon character than a real animal. These octopuses hover above the seafloor searching for prey, and they are among the deepest living octopuses known. The alien appearance of deep sea life has inspired science fiction creators for decades, and many fictional aliens in movies and books bear strong resemblances to real deep sea creatures, borrowing their bioluminescence, their strange body proportions, their predatory jaws, and their exotic camouflage. In a sense, by studying the deep ocean, we are studying alien life, not from another planet, but from another world. Nonetheless, a world as foreign and extreme as the surface of Mars or the clouds of Venus, yet a world that exists right here on Earth, covering most of the planet's surface. Coral in the darkness. When most people think of corals, they imagine colorful tropical coral reefs in shallow sunlit waters. ecosystems teeming with fish and bright with colors. But corals also live in the deep ocean, where they form structures as complex and as important as their shallow water cousins. Deep sea corals, or cold water corals, grow at depths from about 100 feet to over 6,000 feet, living in darkness and cold, where temperatures range from 30 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Unlike shallow water corals that depend on symbiotic algae for much of their nutrition and therefore require sunlight, deep sea corals catch their food from the water, filtering plankton and organic particles with their tentacles and thriving in areas where currents bring abundant food. Some deep sea corals are solitary polyps living individually attached to rocks, while others form colonies that can grow into massive structures. Black corals grow very slowly but can live for thousands of years, forming tree-like colonies several feet tall with branches that wave in the current. Bamboo corals have segmented skeletons alternating between hard calcified sections and flexible organic sections, allowing them to bend with currents without breaking. Stone corals in the deep sea create reefs and thickets that provide habitat for hundreds of other species, creating biodiversity hotspots in an otherwise relatively barren environment. Lophelia pertusa is one of the most common reef-forming deep-sea corals, building structures that can extend for miles and that host fish, crabs, shrimp, brittle stars, sea urchins, and countless other organisms. These deep-sea coral reefs serve many of the same ecological functions as shallow tropical reefs, providing shelter and feeding grounds and nursery habitat. And they are equally vulnerable to disturbance. Deep sea corals grow very slowly, sometimes just a fraction of an inch per year. And when damaged, they may take decades or centuries to recover. Bottom trawling, a fishing method that drags heavy nets across the sea floor, has destroyed vast areas of deep sea coral habitat, scraping away coral colonies that took thousands of years to grow. The discovery that deep sea corals are widespread and ecologically important has led to increased efforts to protect them, with some areas now designated as marine protected areas where bottom trawling is prohibited, though enforcement is challenging in the remote deep ocean. The jellyfish realm. Drifting peacefully through the midnight zone are countless jellyfish and their relatives, gelatinous creatures that pulse slowly through the water or trail long tentacles in the darkness, waiting for prey to blunder into them. Jellyfish are among the most successful inhabitants of the deep ocean, adapted perfectly to a low-energy lifestyle in an environment where food is scarce. Their bodies are composed mostly of water, typically 95% or more, which makes them neutrally buoyant, requiring little energy to stay suspended in the water column. They have no bones, no blood, no brain, no complex organs, just a simple body plan that has proven extraordinarily successful for over 500 million years. Deep-sea jellyfish come in an astonishing variety of forms, from tiny transparent bells just millimeters across to enormous species with tentacles trailing for dozens of feet. Many are bioluminescent, producing glowing displays when disturbed or using steady lights to attract prey or communicate with potential mates. The Atala jellyfish creates a spectacular bioluminescent display when threatened, flashing a ring of blue lights around its bell in a pattern called a burglar alarm that may serve to attract larger predators that might eat whatever is attacking the jellyfish. Some deep-sea jellyfish are bright red or purple, colors that help them hide in the darkness because red light is absent at depth, and red objects appear black. Others are completely transparent except for their digestive system, visible as a colored blob in the center of the bell. Comb jellies, or catenophores, are relatives of jellyfish that move through the water by beating rows of cilia arranged in combs along their bodies. And many species produce beautiful rainbow light effects as they swim, not bioluminescence, but the diffraction of any available light by their moving cilia. Deep-sea comb jellies include some bizarre forms like the Bathyrosaurus, which looks like a transparent lobster complete with tail and legs. Though these are not true appendages, but lobes of tissue. The vampire squid mentioned earlier is sometimes grouped with jellyfish and comb jellies under the informal term jellies because of its soft body and drifting lifestyle, though it is actually a cephalopod related to squid and octopuses. Jellyfish and their relatives are becoming more common in some parts of the ocean due to changes in ocean conditions, including warming, decreased oxygen, and removal of fish that compete with or prey on jellyfish. And some scientists worry about the jellification of the oceans, where jellyfish come to dominate ecosystems that were previously controlled by fish. In the deep ocean, where conditions have been more stable, jellyfish have always been important members of the community, and their success demonstrates that simple body plans can be just as effective as complex ones in the right environment. The pressure of existence. Let us take a moment to contemplate more deeply the physical reality of pressure in the deep ocean and what it means for the creatures living there. Pressure increases linearly with depth, adding 1 atmosphere approximately every 33 feet. So at 33 feet below the surface, the pressure is 2 atmospheres. At 66 feet, it is 3 atmospheres, and so on. At 1,000 feet, the pressure is about 31 atmospheres. At 5,000 feet, it is 152 atmospheres. And at the deepest point in the ocean, it exceeds 1,000 atmospheres. To put this in perspective, 1,000 atmospheres means approximately 15,000 pounds per square inch, or about 8 tons pressing down on every square inch of surface area. A human hand has a surface area of about 20 square inches. So at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, there would be about 160 tons of force pressing on your hand, equivalent to the weight of roughly 100 cars. This crushing pressure would instantly collapse any air-filled space, compressing lungs to nothing, crumpling a submarine like a tin can. Yet deep-sea creatures live comfortably at these pressures because their bodies contain no air spaces and because the fluids and tissues in their bodies are largely incompressible. The water inside a deep-sea fish cell is at the same pressure as the water outside. So there is no net force trying to crush the cell, and the cell maintains its shape and function normally. However, pressure does affect biological molecules and processes in subtle ways. Proteins can be deformed by pressure. Cell membranes can become too rigid or too fluid, and chemical reactions may proceed differently at high pressure than at low pressure. Deep-sea organisms have evolved special adaptations at the molecular level to cope with these effects, including modified proteins that remain functional at high pressure, specialized lipids in cell membranes that maintain proper fluidity, and metabolic pathways adjusted to work under pressure. Bringing deep-sea creatures to the surface causes decompression, and while this does not affect them the same way it affects human divers, it can still be harmful. Fish that have small amounts of gas in their tissues may have that gas expand painfully or fatally, though most deep-sea fish lack swim bladders and other gas spaces. The main problem for deep-sea creatures brought to the surface is usually temperature change rather than pressure change, because the surface water is much warmer than the deep ocean, and many deep-sea organisms cannot tolerate warmth. The deep sea and climate. The deep ocean plays a crucial role in Earth's climate system, storing vast amounts of heat and carbon dioxide and influencing ocean currents that redistribute heat around the planet. About 90% of the heat trapped by greenhouse gases goes into the ocean, and much of that heat is stored in the deep ocean, where it can remain for centuries or millennia, slowly warming the abyss. The ocean absorbs about 1/4 of the carbon dioxide emitted by human activities, and this CO2 reacts with seawater to form carbonic acid, gradually making the ocean more acidic in a process called ocean acidification. While most attention focuses on acidification's effects on shallow water organisms like corals and shellfish, the deep ocean is also affected. Deep sea corals and other calcifying organisms build their skeletons from calcium carbonate, and as the ocean becomes more acidic, it becomes harder for them to precipitate calcium carbonate and easier for existing structures to dissolve. The deep ocean acts as a giant conveyor belt for moving water and heat around the planet through a process called thermohaline circulation. Cold, dense water forms at the poles and sinks to the ocean bottom, flowing along the deep ocean floor toward the equator, while warmer surface water moves toward the poles to replace it. This global circulation pattern takes hundreds of years to complete a full cycle, and it is driven by differences in temperature and salinity that affect water density. Changes in this circulation pattern can have dramatic effects on climate, and there is evidence that past rapid climate changes were triggered by alterations to thermohaline circulation. The deep ocean is warming slowly but measurably as heat from the surface penetrates downward, and this warming may affect deep sea ecosystems in ways scientists are only beginning to understand. Many deep sea organisms are adapted to stable temperatures and may not tolerate even small amounts of warming, and changes in temperature can affect metabolic rates, reproduction, and other vital processes. The deep ocean also faces threats from deep sea mining, an emerging industry interested in extracting mineral resources from the sea floor, including manganese nodules, hydrothermal vent deposits, and cobalt-rich crusts. These minerals form slowly over millions of years and support communities of organisms found nowhere else, and removing them would destroy unique habitats, with impacts that could last for thousands or millions of years. Exploring the unknown deep. Despite decades of deep-sea research, the vast majority of the deep ocean remains unexplored and unstudied, with more than 95% of the deep-sea floor never seen by human eyes or cameras. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than of the deep ocean floor, and there are likely thousands or tens of thousands of deep-sea species yet to be discovered and described by science. Every deep-sea expedition discovers new species, sometimes dozens of them. And scientists estimate that we have probably discovered less than half and perhaps less than a quarter of deep-sea biodiversity. The exploration of the deep ocean requires specialized equipment and technology, including submersibles that can withstand extreme pressure, remotely operated vehicles that can work for hours in the abyss, controlled from ships at the surface, and autonomous underwater vehicles that can explore on their own, following programmed routes. The first deep-sea submersibles were simple steel spheres lowered on cables, cramped and uncomfortable but able to carry observers to depths of several thousand feet. Modern submersibles are technological marvels with viewports made of thick acrylic or sapphire, robotic arms for collecting samples, high-definition cameras for documenting discoveries, and life support systems that allow crews to spend hours in the deep. The submersible Alvin has been exploring the deep ocean since 1964 and has made more than 5,000 dives, discovering hydrothermal vents, exploring the wreck of the Titanic, and collecting countless samples and observations. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, have become increasingly important for deep-sea exploration because they can work longer and go deeper than manned submersibles, and they risk no human lives if something goes wrong. ROVs are connected to surface ships by tethers that provide power and communication, allowing pilots on the ship to control the vehicle in real time while watching video feeds from its cameras. Autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs, are programmed to follow planned routes and collect data without human control. making them useful for mapping large areas of seafloor or for searching for specific features. The development of better deep-sea technology continues with new materials, new sensors, new imaging systems, and new analytical tools that allow scientists to study the deep ocean in ever greater detail. The poetry of depth. As we drift further into this exploration and closer to sleep, let us consider the deep ocean not just as a scientific subject, but as a source of wonder, mystery, and inspiration. A place that speaks to something deep in the human psyche. The ocean has always held a special place in human consciousness, appearing in myths and legends of every culture, associated with creation and destruction, with the unknown and the eternal. The deep ocean takes these associations and magnifies them, representing the ultimate unknown, the ultimate frontier, a place of such extremity that it seems to exist in a different reality than the world we inhabit. Writers and poets have long been drawn to the ocean as metaphor and subject, using its depths to represent the unconscious mind, the unknown future, the mysterious origins of life, the boundary between the known and the unknowable. The deep ocean is darkness and pressure, silence and cold. Yet it is also beauty and life, adaptation and survival, persistence and patience. These contrasts give the deep ocean a poetic resonance, making it meaningful beyond its purely physical properties. To contemplate the deep ocean is to contemplate our own smallness and brevity, to recognize that vast realms exist that we will never see, and that have existed unchanged for millions of years, while entire civilizations have risen and fallen on land. This can be humbling, but also comforting in a strange way, reminding us that the world does not revolve around human activity and that nature continues its processes with or without our attention or approval. The creatures of the deep ocean go about their lives in the darkness, hunting and being hunted, reproducing and dying, following patterns established over evolutionary time, indifferent to human concerns and human observation. There is something peaceful about this indifference, about knowing that a whole world exists beyond the reach of human impact. Though in truth, even the deepest ocean is not entirely beyond our influence. The deep ocean represents possibility and potential, the chance that new discoveries await, that the world still holds secrets, that wonder still exists for those willing to look. In our modern age, when so much has been mapped and documented and explained, the deep ocean reminds us that mystery remains and that we have not yet exhausted the capacity of nature to surprise us. Darkness as habitat. Let us sink deeper into the philosophical dimensions of darkness as we approach sleep, considering how the absence of light shapes not just the physical characteristics of the deep ocean, but the very nature of existence there. Darkness is not merely the absence of light, but a presence in its own right, a condition that defines and constrains what can exist within it. For most of Earth's history, for most organisms, life has been intimately tied to light, to the cycles of day and night, to photosynthesis and the energy of the sun. But the deep ocean exists outside these cycles, in a place where darkness is constant and complete and eternal. This perpetual night creates a different kind of existence, one based on scarcity and patience, on slow metabolisms and infrequent opportunities, on chemical energy rather than solar energy, on senses other than vision. Darkness simplifies some things and complicates others, eliminating the visual complexity of sunlit environments, but requiring more sophisticated chemical sensing, acoustic sensing, and pressure sensing. In darkness, coloration becomes less important for camouflage, except against bioluminescence, and body shape becomes more important for detecting vibrations and water movements. Darkness creates privacy and anonymity, making it harder for predators to find prey, but also making it harder for prey to see predators approaching, creating an evolutionary arms race of detection and stealth that has produced the remarkable adaptations we see in deep-sea creatures. Some have embraced darkness by becoming as invisible as possible through transparency or dark pigmentation, while others have rejected darkness by creating their own light through bioluminescence, turning the tables and using light as a tool in the darkness. The ecology of darkness differs fundamentally from the ecology of light because primary production through photosynthesis is impossible, making the deep ocean dependent on the rain of organic matter from the sunlit layers above or on chemosynthetic bacteria at hydrothermal vents. This dependence creates a food web structured differently than terrestrial or shallow marine food webs, with longer chains from primary production to top predators and with more emphasis on scavenging and detritus feeding. Darkness as habitat teaches us that life is adaptable beyond our usual assumptions, that organisms can thrive without light if other resources are available, and that evolution can solve problems we might think insurmountable. The success of life in the deep ocean demonstrates that darkness is not a barrier to existence, but simply a condition to which life can adapt, given time and selective pressure. The abyss within the deep ocean serves as a powerful metaphor for human psychology, representing the unconscious mind, the hidden depths of personality, the emotions and memories and instincts that exist below the surface of conscious awareness. Psychologists and philosophers have long used ocean imagery to describe the mind, with the conscious mind as the surface waters illuminated by the light of awareness and the unconscious as the dark depths where things exist but cannot be seen directly. Just as the deep ocean contains creatures and landscapes unknown to surface dwellers, the unconscious mind contains aspects of ourselves that remain hidden from everyday consciousness, but that influence our behavior and feelings in ways we do not fully understand. Just as the deep ocean occasionally sends up surprises in the form of deep-sea creatures that wash ashore or that are caught in nets, the unconscious occasionally pushes thoughts and feelings to the surface in dreams, in slips of tongue, in inexplicable moods, or sudden insights. Exploring the deep ocean parallels, exploring the unconscious mind, both requiring special tools and methods, both potentially revealing things that are strange or unsettling, both ultimately rewarding with increased understanding and appreciation for hidden complexity. The darkness of the deep ocean mirrors the darkness of aspects of ourselves that we prefer not to examine, the shadow side of personality that contains what we have repressed or denied. And yet, just as the deep ocean is full of life and wonder despite its darkness, the unconscious mind contains not just dark urges, but also creativity, wisdom, and untapped potential. The deep ocean teaches us that darkness need not be feared, but can be explored carefully and respectfully. That what seems frightening or alien at first can become familiar and even beautiful with understanding. As you drift towards sleep, you descend into your own inner depths, leaving behind the bright surface awareness of waking consciousness and sinking into the darker realms of sleep and dreams. This nightly journey into unconsciousness parallels our journey into the deep ocean, both adventures into darkness, both surrenders to something larger than conscious control. Sleep, like the deep ocean, is necessary and restorative, a place where the ordinary rules are suspended and where things can happen that are impossible in the waking world, or the sunlit shallows. The future of the deep. As we approach the conclusion of our journey and the edge of sleep, let us look forward and consider what the future might hold for the deep ocean and for humanity's relationship with this last frontier. The deep ocean faces multiple threats from human activities, including climate change, ocean acidification, overfishing, pollution, and deep sea mining. And how we respond to these threats will determine whether future generations inherit a healthy deep ocean or a degraded one. Climate change is warming the deep ocean slowly but measurably, and even small temperature increases can have significant effects on organisms adapted to stable cold conditions. Ocean acidification is changing the chemistry of deep waters, making it harder for calcifying organisms to build and maintain their shells and skeletons, and potentially disrupting food webs in ways we do not yet fully understand. Overfishing has already depleted many deep-sea fish populations, including orange roughy and grenadiers, species that reproduce slowly and cannot sustain heavy fishing pressure. And continued exploitation could drive these species to commercial or even biological extinction. Pollution in the form of plastic debris, chemical contaminants, and other waste has reached even the deepest parts of the ocean, with microplastics found in the Mariana Trench and persistent organic pollutants detected in deep-sea organisms, showing that no part of the ocean is beyond human impact. Deep-sea mining represents a new and potentially devastating threat to deep ocean ecosystems, with companies planning to extract mineral resources from the seafloor in areas that have never been disturbed by human activity and that host unique organisms found nowhere else. The minerals targeted by deep-sea mining include manganese nodules scattered across abyssal plains, cobalt-rich crusts on seamounts, and hydrothermal vent deposits rich in copper, zinc, and other valuable metals. These resources form extremely slowly, over millions of years, and support specialized communities of organisms. And removing them would cause ecological damage that could persist for thousands or millions of years. International governance of the deep ocean is complicated because most of the deep sea floor lies in international waters beyond any nation's jurisdiction. And while agreements exist to regulate exploitation, enforcement is challenging, and the political will to protect the deep ocean often conflicts with economic interests in extracting resources. Scientists and conservationists are working to increase awareness of the deep ocean's importance and vulnerability, to document its biodiversity before it is lost, and to establish marine protected areas that exclude destructive activities. These efforts have had some success with the creation of large marine reserves in several countries. But much more needs to be done to protect the deep ocean comprehensively. The gift of the deep. What gifts does the deep ocean offer us beyond the scientific knowledge and economic resources it contains? Perhaps most importantly, it offers perspective on our place in nature and on the resilience and creativity of life. The deep ocean reminds us that Earth is largely an ocean planet, with the sunlit land and shallow seas where humans live representing just a tiny fraction of the biosphere. Most of Earth's living space is deep ocean, dark and cold and high pressure. And most of the planet's history has involved a deep ocean largely unchanged in its basic characters since early in Earth's history. This deep ocean has witnessed mass extinctions and recoveries, the rise and fall of countless species, the slow dance of continents across the globe, and yet it has persisted, maintaining conditions suitable for life through all these changes. The deep ocean teaches us about adaptation and evolution, showing how organisms can become specialized for extreme conditions and how ecosystems can function in the absence of sunlight using alternative energy sources. The chemosynthetic ecosystems at hydrothermal vents have fundamentally changed our understanding of life's requirements and possibilities, suggesting that life might exist in places we previously thought uninhabitable, including beneath the ice of ocean moons in the outer solar system. The deep ocean offers beauty of a different kind than shallow tropical reefs or mountain vistas. A spare alien beauty based on bizarre forms and bioluminescent displays, on textures and movements rather than bright colors. Appreciating this beauty requires shifting our aesthetic expectations. But the reward is access to wonders that few humans have witnessed directly. The deep ocean offers mystery and the promise of discovery. The assurance that no matter how much we learn, more remains to be discovered, that the world is larger and stranger than we imagine. In our technological age, when Google can seemingly answer any question and satellites can photograph any location, the deep ocean remains mostly unmapped and unexplored. A true frontier that will take centuries to fully investigate. This ongoing mystery is valuable in itself, maintaining a sense of wonder and humility that is increasingly rare in modern life. As you rest now on the edge of sleep, consider carrying with you this sense of the deep ocean's mysteries, its darkness and its hidden life, its patience and its permanence. Let the deep ocean remind you that rest and quiet and darkness are natural and necessary, that not everything needs to be illuminated or understood immediately, that some things are meant to remain mysterious, and that this mystery is not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be appreciated. Descent into dreams. Now, as we complete our exploration, and as sleep reaches out to embrace you, let us make a final, gentle descent together, from the midnight zone down through the abyssal plain and into the deepest trenches, sinking peacefully through these dark waters toward the bottom, toward rest, toward sleep. The water around us is cold and still, the pressure enormous, but not burdensome, because we are made of the same substance as the sea, incompressible and fluid, able to exist at any depth without effort or strain. There is no light except the occasional bioluminescent flash far in the distance, a brief spark in the darkness that appears and fades like a distant star. And these flashes become less frequent as we sink deeper, further from the zones where life is most abundant. The darkness is complete and comfortable, wrapping around us like a soft blanket, supporting us on all sides with gentle pressure, cradling us in the embrace of the deep. We sink without effort, our density perfectly matched to the water so that we neither float nor fall, but drift slowly downward at a pace that matches our breathing, descending with each exhalation, suspended with each inhalation, moving deeper in a slow, steady rhythm. The cold penetrates, but does not disturb, seeping in slowly until we are the same temperature as the water, until there is no difference between inside and outside, no boundary between self and sea, just a continuous fluid existence. The silence is profound, not an empty silence, but a full silence containing the weight of the water, the immensity of the ocean, the patience of geological time. In this silence, thoughts slow and simplify, becoming less distinct, blurring into each other like the edges of objects in darkness, until thinking itself becomes unnecessary and we simply exist, simply are. Simply sink deeper into the welcoming dark. We pass through schools of lanternfish, their bioluminescent rows of lights marking their presence, though we can barely see their forms, and they part to let us through without alarm, recognizing us as another drifting thing in the eternal night. We pass jellies pulsing slowly through the water, their transparent bells catching faint glows from their own bioluminescence, and we match our rhythm to theirs. Slow pulsing breaths, like their slow pulsing contractions, moving with the flow of water rather than against it. The bottom rises to meet us gradually, the sediment soft and yielding, and we settle onto it like a particle of marine snow. Coming to rest at last after our long descent, lying still in the deep darkness at the bottom of the ocean, at the bottom of consciousness, at the bottom of wakefulness, where sleep begins. The bottom of the world, here at the deepest point of our journey, lying on the soft sediment of the ocean floor, we can rest in perfect stillness and perfect darkness, supported completely by the environment, requiring nothing, doing nothing, simply being present in this moment of profound quietude. The weight of the entire ocean presses down from above, but does not crush, distributed evenly across every surface, becoming not a burden, but a comfort, like a heavy blanket on a cold night, like the weight of exhaustion that makes sleep inevitable and welcome. At this depth, time moves differently, or perhaps does not move at all. The boundary between moments becoming indistinct, seconds and hours blending together in the timeless darkness where nothing marks the passage of days or seasons or years. Here at the bottom, change happens slowly over geological time, sediment accumulating at a rate of inches per 1,000 years. Creatures living for decades or centuries without haste or urgency. Currents flowing so slowly that their movement is barely perceptible. This is the pace of the deep, the rhythm of the abyss. And as you rest here, you can let your own rhythm slow to match it. Your heartbeat slowing, your breathing deepening and slowing, your thoughts arriving less frequently with longer spaces of quiet between them, until finally the thoughts stop coming altogether, and there is only the darkness and the silence and the gentle pressure and the cold. You are safe here at the bottom, beyond the reach of surface storms, beyond the turbulence of the upper ocean, in a place of absolute stability, where nothing unexpected happens and where you can rest as long as you need. The deep ocean has been here for billions of years and will be here for billions more, patient and unchanging. And in this moment, you are part of that patience and that permanence, connected to the ancient rhythms of the planet, participating in the slow cycles of water and mineral and energy that have operated since the oceans first formed. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go, no problem you need to solve, no question you need to answer. Everything can wait. Everything is handled. You are exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you need to do, which is nothing at all except resting, sleeping, letting go of everything except the simple fact of your existence in this moment. The darkness holds you gently. The pressure supports you completely. The cold preserves you perfectly. And you can sink now not just into the deep ocean, but into deep sleep, releasing the last connection to waking consciousness and allowing yourself to drift into dreams. The return that waits. Know that when you are ready, when sleep has restored you and rest has renewed you, you will rise again from these depths, ascending slowly back through the layers of the ocean, back through the midnight zone and the twilight zone, back toward the light, back toward the surface, back toward waking. But that return is for later, for morning, for the future. And right now, there is only this descent, this sinking, this letting go into the dark water of sleep. The journey up will take care of itself when the time comes, just as you know without thinking that you will wake again even as you surrender to sleep. Trusting in the natural cycles that govern rest and waking, descent and ascent, sleeping and dreaming and waking. For now you can release all concern about the return, all planning for tomorrow, all remembering of yesterday, letting these thoughts drift away like particles of marine snow falling through the water column, visible for a moment and then gone into the darkness below. The deep ocean will still be here when you wake, its creatures continuing their patient existence, its waters flowing in their ancient patterns, its mysteries waiting for explorers yet to come. But you need not explore any more tonight. You have journeyed far enough, descended deep enough, learned enough about the dark side of the ocean and about the value of darkness and depth and pressure and cold. You have earned this rest, this sleep, this release into the gentle night of the deep sea where nothing is demanded and everything is permitted except staying awake. So let yourself go now, completely and finally, sinking that last bit deeper into sleep, crossing that invisible boundary between being awake and being asleep. That transition, as mysterious as the transition from the twilight zone to the midnight zone, from dim light to absolute darkness. Let the last traces of tension and holding on dissolve like salt in water, becoming part of the solution rather than something separate. And drift now in the dark currents of sleep, where dreams move like deep-sea creatures through the darkness of unconsciousness, strange and beautiful and forgotten by morning, but important nonetheless, doing their work of processing and integrating and healing while you rest in the depths. The eternal deep. And so we come to the end of our journey into the dark side of the ocean, having descended from the bright surface through layers of increasing darkness and pressure and cold to reach the very bottom, the deepest point, the place where our exploration becomes your rest. We have discovered that the deep ocean is not empty or dead, but full of life in forms strange and wonderful, adapted over millions of years to conditions that seem impossible and yet that prove not just possible, but sustainable. Not just sustainable, but rich with complexity and beauty. We have learned that darkness need not be feared, but can be embraced as necessary and natural. That pressure can support rather than crush. That cold can preserve rather than destroy. And that isolation can foster unique communities rather than preventing life altogether. The deep ocean has taught us about extremes and about adaptation, about patience and about persistence, about the remarkable creativity of evolution in solving problems and exploiting opportunities. It has shown us that our planet is largely unexplored despite centuries of scientific investigation, that mysteries remain and wonders wait for discovery, that the familiar surface world we inhabit is just a thin skin on a mostly alien planet covered by dark waters we have barely begun to understand. The creatures of the deep ocean, those bioluminescent fish and giant squid and transparent jellies and bizarre anglerfish, continue their lives in the eternal midnight, hunting and hiding, glowing and drifting. Living according to rhythms established over evolutionary time and according to rules we are only beginning to decipher. They do not know we have visited them in our submersibles and our remotely operated vehicles, do not care about the observations we have made or the samples we have collected. And they will continue their existence, whether we pay attention or not, indifferent to human concerns in their alien realm. This indifference is both humbling and oddly comforting, reminding us that the world does not revolve around humanity, and that nature persists beyond our influence and control. Or at least did until recently, and perhaps still does in the deepest parts of the ocean. As you rest now in sleep as deep as the ocean is deep, know that you are connected to these creatures and these places through the water in your body, through the salt in your blood that mirrors the salt in the sea, through the ancient evolutionary history that links all life on Earth back to origins in the ocean billions of years ago. We came from the sea. Our ancestors were marine creatures before they ventured onto land. And we carry the ocean within us, still in our chemistry and our physiology. When you sleep, you return in a sense to that ancient aquatic origin, floating in the inner ocean of of unconsciousness. Breathing the fluid of dreams, resting in the dark as our ancestors rested in the dark waters before light and land and air. Sleep well in these depths, rest peacefully in this darkness, and when morning comes and you rise back to the surface of waking consciousness, perhaps you will carry with you some gift from the deep, some insight or peace or renewed appreciation for the mysteries that surround us, for the darkness that balances light, for the depth that gives meaning to surface, for the ocean that covers our planet and that lives within our cells and that connects us to the long history of life on Earth. The dark side of the ocean is not a place of evil or danger, but a place of wonder and life, a place of rest and patience, a place that teaches us about adaptation and survival and the endless creativity of nature. May you carry these lessons into your dreams and into your waking life. And may you always remember that beneath the bright surface, beneath the noise and the light and the constant motion, there exists a deeper place of quiet and darkness and peace. A place you can visit whenever you need rest, whenever you need perspective, whenever you need to remember that you are part of something larger and older and more mysterious than the small concerns of daily existence. The ocean abides, the deep endures, and you can rest now in that knowledge, sleeping deeply and peacefully, cradled in darkness as the earth itself is cradled in the darkness of space. Spinning through the cosmic night, alive and aware and temporary and precious. Drifting through dreams as particles of marine snow drift through the midnight zone. Falling gently toward the bottom, toward rest, toward the peace that waits in the deepest darkness where all journeys end and all sleep begins.